Good afternoon, everyone. For the people, that was our theme in the election, and here we are gathered in the Rayburn Room for the people. Democrats from both sides of the Capitol coming together to recognize and correct the situation, the financial security concerns of America's working families. We have a great array of presenters today, and many of our colleagues have joined us in unity to raise the minimum wage. I just want to acknowledge two of our VIPs, our very important people, Tiffany Lowe and Howard Hanna, who will be presenting today. Tiffany Lowe and Howard Hanna. Let us salute Bobby Scott, the chairman of the Education and Labor Committee, Reps Mark Pocan, Stephanie Murphy, and Donald Norcross for their leadership on the bill on the House side. We're honored to be joined by Senator Bernie Sanders, Senator Patty Murray from the Senate side. Welcome to the House. Welcome back to you. And we will be hearing from other guests here today, including the Democratic leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer. We're blessed also to be, we'll be hearing from our Democratic leader, Steny Hoyer. Thank you, Steny. In the course of the proceedings, Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia is here from Texas. Also from Texas, Sheila Jackson Lee. I just saw with the eyes in the back of my head. They say that about moms. We have Nanette Barragan from California, Suzanne Bonamici from Oregon, Dwight Evans from Pennsylvania, and others will be joining us whom I have not already acknowledged. Let me just tell you this. When we won the House in 2006 and 2007, we came together. In the first 100 hours, one of the 6 priorities for us was to raise the minimum wage. It hadn't been raised like in 11 years, and we did it right there in the first 100 hours of the new Congress. As soon as it was signed by President Bush, when we went out to celebrate our victory out on the lawn of the Capitol and the rest, Senator Kennedy was with us, and he had been a champion on this issue. And when he finished his remarks, when we all finished our remarks, he said, "You know what we have to do now?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "Raise the minimum wage." Again, I said, "We just did." No, again, it's so very, very important. As we all know, the middle class is the backbone of our middle class in our country. And the middle class and those who aspire to it are those we are here to work for. And that middle class is essential to the strength of our democracy. So I thank all who are here for their patriotic work that they are doing to strengthen our democracy as they strengthen the financial stability of America's working families. And with that, I'm pleased to yield to the gentleman who is the chair of the Education and Labor Committee, Bobby Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker Pelosi, and thank you for your leadership. I'm pleased to be joined by many House and Senate colleagues and workers from around the country to introduce the Raise the Wage Act of 2019. This bill achieves 3 critical goals. First, it gradually increases the minimum wage in 6 steps to $15 an hour by 2024. Second, it ensures that every worker is paid the full minimum wage by phasing out sub-minimum wages and creating one fair wage for all workers. And third, it ensures that the minimum wage keeps pace with inflation by tying the future increases to median wages. We're here today because we believe that no American working full-time should be living in poverty. After nearly 10 years with no increase in the minimum wage, millions of working families are being left behind. We're also here today because gradually increasing the minimum wage is not only good for workers, it's also good for business and good for the economy. When we put money in the pockets of American workers, they spend that money in their communities. So this bill will stimulate the economy on Main Street. And we're here today because we know that American workers need a raise. The Raise the Wage Act will increase the pay and standard of living for nearly 40 million Americans across this country. This is one important step towards making the economy work for all Americans. And I'm proud to stand here with my colleagues to introduce a bill that reflects our commitment to supporting hardworking Americans. It already has, let's see, it says 178. I know it's up to 185, and I think it's more than that by now, House co-sponsors. And so we have a lot of support, and we're on the way to raising the wage. And so it's now my pleasure to introduce my good friend and lead sponsor in the Senate of the Raise the Wage Act, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Let me thank Speaker Pelosi, Majority Leader Hoyer, Minority Leader Schumer, Chairman Bobby Scott, Ranking Member Pat Murray, and everybody else for being here today. And let me say a special thanks to all of you guys. You are the folks, not only here, but all over this country, the Fight for 15, the grassroots activists who have stood up and fought back now for years. You are the people who made this day possible, and because of your efforts, we're going to win this fight. We are living today in an American economy which is doing very well for the people on top, not so well for working families. In the midst of massive income and wealth inequality, with 46% of all new income going to the top 1%, millions of American workers continue to struggle economically as they work 2 or 3 jobs to put food on the table and take care of their families, and that we are going to end. It is not a radical idea, and Speaker Pelosi made this point. It is not a radical idea to say that we should have an economy and a government that works for all of us, not just the people on top. And let me be very clear, and I don't think there's any disagreement, at least in this room, and that is that the current $7.25 an hour federal minimum wage is a starvation wage. Last time Congress passed legislation to raise the minimum wage was 12 years ago. Needless to say, the economy in the world has changed then, and minimum wage legislation must change as well. And that is why we are all here together to say in this country we're going to have a minimum wage which is a living wage, $15 an hour. This legislation will provide a pay raise to more than 40 million Americans. It will put an extra $3,500 a year into the pockets of the people who need it the most, that is low-wage workers. You know, we hear a lot of rhetoric coming from our Republican colleagues, and they say that the minimum wage, the only people who benefit from that are teenagers who do summer work. Well, that is absolutely not true. The majority of low-wage workers are women, 20 million of whom would get a raise by increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. More than half of the beneficiaries will be African American and Latino. Incredibly, over 85%, if you can believe this, child care workers, people doing some of the most important work in this country, make less than $15 an hour. Now, instead of costing us jobs, as many of my conservative colleagues claim, increasing the minimum wage, as Bobby Scott just said, will put money into the pockets of workers who will then go out and spend that money and, in fact, create more jobs. When we raise the minimum wage to a living wage, poverty will go down, and it's time we address the issue of poverty in this country. So the bottom line here is our Republican colleagues and the president thought that a major economic initiative was to give over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%. and large multinational corporations. We disagree. We think we should pay attention to working people and raise the minimum wage to a living wage. Thank you very much. And now it is my honor, it is a true honor, to introduce Tiffany Lowe, who is a mother of four and a cashier at KFC in Memphis, Tennessee. Tiffany?
Hi, my name is Tiffany Lowe, and I'm a mother and a fast food worker in Memphis, Tennessee. I am honored to be here with you all to introduce to you this $15 minimum wage bill. My first job was in fast food. I made $6.50 an hour. 18 years later, I am here at KFC, and I make $7.65 an hour. That's less than $1 more in a decade. I raised 4 children on these poverty wages. We stay with my parents to save money, but I have trouble sleeping at night. I worry about my bills. I worry I will run out of food. I worry I won't be able to get my children back and forth to school because I don't have enough money. I have no money for childcare or after-school programs. Many times they sit in the lobby of the store until I get off because I have no choice. And I am not alone. Also, Inez Hodges, a home health care worker from Virginia, who has trouble providing for her own family while taking care of other people's loved ones. Or Dennis McDonald's, an adjunct facility member who has no benefits, no health care, and he also works in fast food to support his family. I am here joined by underpaid workers from across the country to say that everyone who works, no matter where they're from, everyone deserves to be paid enough to lead a decent life and provide for their families. It was unbelievable. 6 years ago, 200 fast food workers in New York would walk off the job for 15 in a union and walk back into their shops. Now the demand for 15 has grown into an undeniable movement of underpaid workers. Now the demand for 15 has grown into an undeniable movement for underpaid workers. Not only have I gone on strike and protested, I've canvassed 150 doors a week during the midterm elections. By sticking together and acting like a union, workers of Fight for 15 completely changed what's possible and made $15 an hour the new baseline for decent pay in America. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. No matter where we live, no matter our race, religion, or background, we all deserve more. Now, we are here on Capitol Hill talking about a federal minimum wage of just $15 an hour because thousands of workers came together, went on strike, and demanded it. Now more than 22 million Americans have won raises since the Fight for 15 has begun. 1/5 of the country is now covered by a $15 minimum wage. I won't stop until we get what we need for our families. We cannot afford to stop until we all have 15 in a union, and that's exactly what we'll do. Together with the members of Congress, Senator Bernie Sanders, Patty Murray, Representative Bobby Scott, Mark Pocan, and Stephanie Murphy, and Donald Norcross, we will win. Yes, we will win. I just want to say thanks to all the co-sponsors and the leaders of this bill, and a special thanks to the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, for her support. Now I will yield to the Speaker, Representative Schumer.
Close enough. I'm proud of you. I've been called a lot worse. Okay, I want to thank my colleagues, Senators Sanders and Murray, for their hard work on this bill in the Senate, as well as Representatives Scott, Pocan, and Murphy for their work in the House, and of course my colleagues Speaker Pelosi and Leader Hoyer. Now, the harsh truth of the matter is that minimum wage is no longer a living wage. It's a poverty wage in so many places and towns across the country. And no American who works hard should live in poverty. That's always been part of America, and we're going to make it that way once again. In 2014, I was introduced by one of my favorite unions, 32BJ. Got some of you guys here? Good. 32BJ, to a young woman named Sharika Elliott. I got to know her. She was my guest at the State of the Union. She was in her late 20s. She'd been working as a cleaner of bathrooms at an airport, at JFK Airport. She lived in East New York. She got up at she got on a bus at 4 p.m. It took her 2 hours. They didn't have good mass transit to get to the airport at 6. She started working at 6. She worked 8 hours, finished at 4. They only paid her for 7 hours because they made her take an hour for lunch at around midnight and didn't pay her. Then she got back on the bus, got home at about 6 a.m., got her kids, she had 2 daughters, ready for school, got on buses to take them to school, and slept maybe 2 hours. She said to me, Mr. Schumer, I've never been able to buy a Christmas present for my children. Mr. Schumer, we pass by a McDonald's and my kids ask, what is in there? What's that like? Because she was making so little money. Now, because of the good work in New York, she's paid more than $15 an hour, and she's not going to live a life of luxury, but she's not going to live a life in poverty. And she can provide some dignity for her hard work cleaning bathrooms for her children and for herself. And so that's what we must do for every Sharika Elliott in America. The last 2 years have exposed the lie that was at the center of President Trump's campaign. He pitched himself as a champion for working America. But as soon as he got into office, he became a president for corporate America, against working Americans. How did he begin his presidency? He installed billionaires and special interest CEOs in his cabinet. Then he worked to strip health care away from average Americans. And to top it all off, he jammed through a massive trillion-dollar tax cuts for corporations and the wealthiest of the wealthy. Well, now we're standing here today, and President Trump's continuing his heartless and cruel policies. He's using hundreds of thousands of federal workers as bargaining chips in the longest shutdown in American history. Simply put, President Trump has completely abandoned American workers. Well, if President Trump isn't going to stick up for American workers, we Democrats will. Thank you. Next, I would like to call on Leader Hoyer.
Thank you very much, Senator Schumer. I want to congratulate the leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer. He and I came to this Congress together in the 97th Congress. And
He had black hair and I had hair.
I want to thank this shy and retiring underpaid person, Tiffany Lowe. Wow. Go get him, girl. I want to thank Bobby Scott for his leadership. Speaker Pelosi, who, as she said, the last time we were in charge, one of the first things we did was raise the minimum wage. It was not enough then. It is clearly not enough now. I want to thank Senator Murray for her leadership. Representative Pocan and Representative Murphy, my good friend, and all of those who have joined with us. Senator Sanders, thank you for your leadership, for the least of these. As my faith tells me, we ought to pay attention not to the wealthiest of these, but the least of these. That will be our judgment. What if I told you that 50 years from now, your purchasing power would be reduced by 40%? That's what we've done. In 1968, the purchasing power was 40% higher, and that was the 160 was the minimum wage, higher than it is today, 50 years later. Is there any doubt that people are stressed and angry and hurting, and families are not as healthy and enjoying well-being as much as they ought to in the richest country on earth? And yet, as Senator Sanders and so many others have pointed out, what did we do in the last Congress? We took care of billionaires and multimillionaires and multi-corporations before we reached out to those who are making the least. This bill will seek to make some progress. It's not where we need to be, Senator, you know that. But it makes progress, and progress is important. I offered heighten the minimum wage. Nancy and I were serving on the Labor Health Committee. It passed in committee in 2006. And my Republican colleagues who were in charge refused to bring the bill to the floor. I will tell you, not only is Mr. Scott going to bring this bill to the floor, but I'm going to put it on the floor. You've already heard what this will do, but it will also make our economy fairer and more successful, end discrimination against people with disabilities, eliminating 14C contracts that allow employers to pay for the sub-minimum wage. That's important to me because I was the sponsor, along with a lot of others, and Speaker Pelosi of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And Patty, you worked on that, and you worked on that with us, Senator. Raising the minimum wage will help low-income families, but it will help all of us. It will help all families. This is a family issue for all of us, and it will help elderly as well, because their children will be helped. This increase isn't just good policy for the lowest income earners. It will help lift all boats, as I said, by pushing wages higher across the economy for average working people. Moreover, it will help local businesses in every corner of America by boosting, as again Senator Sanders said, consumer spending. You give a multimillionaire a tax cut, he doesn't spend it. He doesn't have to spend it because he has enough spending money. But you give somebody who is making a minimum wage or just getting by, they spend that money, and it makes the economy where 70% is consumer spending in America. I want to thank Chairman Scott and Education and Labor Committee Democrats for their hard work on this bill. I look forward to bringing it, as I said, to the floor. Now, I want to introduce to you somebody who's not making...
Before you do, I have to do something. I'm going to go back to you to
All right.
introduce our guest. Let's hear from our Democratic leader, Mr. Hoyer. Thank you. And unfortunately, I'm being called away, but I wanted to join you in acknowledging again, as I did earlier, Tiffany, and again, our special guest, whom you will introduce, and next, Howard Hanna. But I also want to acknowledge the president of the SEIU, Mary Kay Henry, who is here with us. And acknowledge the SEIU in the fight for 15, Kyle Hanner, that guy with the I just want to say this one thing, and Stenny and all of our speakers have referenced it. Do you know by today, many of the CEOs of the companies that were fighting to get the minimum wage increased, they have earned as much in the first couple of weeks in January as they will pay these employees for the whole year. That is not justice. That ain't fair. That isn't right. And we don't begrudge anyone their success and their income. but we do begrudge exploitation of the workers to that extent. So this is about not only the money of the $15, it's about the values that our country is about. So thank you, Mary Kay, thank you, Kyle, thank you all. Thank you for all of this. And with that, I yield back to the distinguished House Democratic leader, which means he's in charge of putting the bills on the floor. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you for your leadership, not only today, but also in '07 when we raised it to $7.25. Now, as I started to say, the person I'm going to introduce now is not making the minimum wage. He's making significantly above the minimum wage. But the gentleman I'm going to introduce to you has a business. He has a number of businesses. And he believes not only in the minimum wage, but he pays his people today, not waiting for 2024, today, $15 an hour. They're all looking, Howard, they're going to give you an application. He's from Kansas City. He owns a hotel and restaurant in Kansas City. And he plans to open 2 more restaurants in 2019. Howard currently pays, as I just told you, his workers $15 an hour. So this is a person who's going to tell you, it's not bad for business, it's good for business to pay your people so that they are not anguishing every day about how they're going to pay their bills, support their family, but are going to be focusing on what they do. And you're going to be more productive, more profitable, and more successful. Ladies and gentlemen, a terrific American, Howard Hanna, from Kansas City, Missouri. Howard?
Good afternoon. I'm Howard Hanna, the owner of the Rieger and Sava, 2 restaurants in Kansas City, Missouri. We employ around 50 people, all who make significantly more than the current minimum wage. I strongly support the Raise the Wage Act, including ensuring that all workers are paid at least the full federal minimum wage. I'm speaking from my experience as a business owner, representing businesses for a fair minimum wage, in calling on Congress to act. 2 things are clear. First, that the minimum wage has not kept up with the cost of living. You've heard that from every speaker today. Second, that paying a higher wage has real bottom line benefits for businesses. One of the industries that will be most impacted by the Raise the Wage Act is the restaurant and hospitality industry, and that impact will be positive. In the past, it was possible for a first-generation American, for example, to get a job as a dishwasher and then years later become the chef and owner of their own restaurant and to, create their own restaurant culture and to employ other people in their community. That's so much harder today. Far too many people work long hours and yet still live in poverty. The cost of living has continued to rise while wages have stagnated. We need wages that a full-time, hardworking person can truly live a life on. Paying a living wage and treating our employees well has been a recipe for success for our businesses. We're looking forward to opening 2 new restaurants next year while existing businesses continue to grow. To us, quality and a great customer experience are everything. We need dedicated employees whose goals align with ours to provide real hospitality to our guests and make our restaurants the best they can be. Paying a living wage has helped us recruit and retain people and deliver that great customer service. The low-wage, high-turnover business model makes no sense. Training new staff is expensive. Once someone has learned the job, we'd like them to stay with us for as long as possible. We want them to build up institutional knowledge and to get to know the ins and outs of our businesses and our clientele. When people are paid fairly, they feel respected. They care more about the business and are better team players. They're more careful about food waste, and they're more efficient with labor. They look out for our best interests because they know we're looking out for theirs. Raising the minimum wage raises everyone up. It puts money in the hands of those who need it the most, and also those who are most likely to spend it now. And that will boost the economy. It hurts us all when some businesses pay so little that their employees can't make a living. People working full-time shouldn't have to depend on public assistance to cover basics like rent and food. Raising the minimum wage levels the playing field for businesses that are paying a fair share and are invested in their staff and in their communities. I believe that raising the minimum wage is a win-win for workers and for business. It's good for our communities and it's good for our country. Every day, for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and late at night, restaurant workers show up. They and others involved in food production. We feed and nourish you. We create environments for you to celebrate in when you're up and also to lift you up when you're down. This is your chance to show up and take care of us. It's good for our workers and for our businesses. I hope that you'll do the right thing and support the Raise the Wage Act. Thank you. Now I have the pleasure to introduce Senator Patty Murray, ranking member of the HELP Committee and a longtime champion of working people.
Howard, thank you so much for your great words and for the work you're doing and for showing us all a great example of how this does work. Thank you. I want to add my thanks to all the members of Congress, Chairman Scott, who I've been working with, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Senator Sanders, our other members, all of them who are here today and fighting so hard for this. But most of all, I want to thank the folks behind me who are here speaking for so many people who can't be here. Thank you to all of you. We are here today for workers like Tiffany. Tiffany, thank you for sharing your amazing story. I've heard the same thing from so many workers in my home state of Washington who are up at night worrying about their bills or their children because they can't afford childcare. Tiffany, you are not just speaking for yourself, you're speaking for millions of Americans today. And there are millions of women and men across the country who do work a full-time job or work multiple jobs and are still unable to pay their bills and make ends meet. When President Trump and his administration continue to roll back protections for workers and tilt the playing field even further in favor of corporations and billionaires, Democrats are here fighting for an economy where every person has a good paying job that allows them to take care of their families and provide their children with more opportunities than they were given. There are a lot of steps we can take to ensure that more workers, especially the millions of women, by the way, who are supporting their families, have the economic security to build better lives. And I'm proud that one of the first steps we are taking in this new Congress is to introduce the Raise the Wage Act to gradually raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Under this bill, 20 million women across this country will get a raise, including 40% of Black working women and 35% of Latino working women. And by the way, by eliminating the tipped wage, which we do in this, the Raise the Wage Act will help provide economic security to some of the lowest wage workers, 2/3 of whom are women. Raising the minimum wage will provide greater economic opportunity for hundreds of thousands of workers with disabilities, some of whom are paid pennies an hour, helping them to transition out of poverty and begin earning a fair wage. I have seen this work in Washington State and across the country. Our economy works best when workers and families are able to succeed. So we have to restore the value of the minimum wage and build an economy that provides that economic security to every worker in this country. That's what we are here today fighting for. So thank you all for being here, and I'm proud to introduce Congressman Mark Pocan, Leader in the House.
I want to thank Senator Murray for your tireless work, and my Democratic colleagues who are here, as well as the workers and small business owners who are here in supporting the increase of the minimum wage. I come to Congress as a nearly 3-decade-long member of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, as well as 3 decades as a small business owner. And I can tell you that no family in this country can get by and make their ends meet on $7.25 an hour. In my home district in the state of Wisconsin, you would have to work 91 hours a week just to afford a 2-bedroom rental apartment. Now, there's a couple myths that are out there. Some have argued that we need a regional minimum wage, and that's a bad idea. According to the Economic Policy Institute, that by 2024, when the wage kicks in, the cost of living in every single region in this country will require workers to make at least $15 an hour to achieve a basic standard of living. And a regional minimum wage would lock in lower wages in historically low wage areas, and in states with weak labor standards, a federal minimum wage may be the only way to have an effective labor market institution that can elevate wages. Secondly, the myth of what a minimum wage worker is. I go to a lot of high schools in my district, and I ask them, what percent of people who get the minimum wage do you think are under 20 years old? I get 70% as an answer. I get 50% of an answer. The answer is less than 10% of workers. The average worker is 36 years old. It is 9.8% that are under 20 years old. And that means that 30% of the workforce would get a raise out of this bill, 40 million people. It's also said that this is a part-time endeavor. A majority of these wage earners are working full-time, and nearly a quarter have children. That's the reality of the minimum wage worker in this country. It is far past time that we have not raised this minimum wage. It is impossible to live on $15,000 a year, and I would challenge my colleagues who may oppose this to go ahead and try living on $15,000 a year. We currently make 11.5 times that, and I don't think we do 11.5 times the work as Tiffany and everyone else who's here. So I'm very proud to be here on behalf of raising the minimum wage, and I would like to introduce a tireless advocate for her constituents, a friend and colleague of mine, Representative Stephanie Murphy from Florida.
Thank you very much, Congressman Pocan. Thank you so much to Chairman Scott for pulling together this coalition of people who believe working families deserve a raise. I'm proud to stand here alongside my colleagues in support of the Raise the Wage Act. Together, we represent a broad range of views that exist within the Democratic caucus, but we're united in support of the idea that in the greatest country on earth, no person who has the dignity of a full-time job should face the indignity of not being able to provide for themselves and their loved ones. And I believe that increasing the federal minimum wage is the right thing to do for American workers, for American businesses, and for the American economy. My Orlando district is a powerful case in point. It has both a relatively high cost of living, especially when it comes to housing, and the lowest median income of all the 50 largest metropolitan areas in the country. And although it is slightly above the federal minimum wage, the Florida minimum wage is not a living wage. Workers in my district who earn this wage can't fully support themselves or their families. And this is a painful fact of life for too many people in my state and around the country. And at the same time, I believe that you cannot reasonably claim to be pro-worker unless you're also pro-business, for the simple reason that the vast majority of American workers are hired and retained by businesses. And as someone who used to counsel startups when I worked in the private sector, and as the spouse of a proud small business owner, I could not support this bill if I thought it would damage businesses and by extension be harmful to their workers. To the contrary, I believe this legislation would provide a boost to businesses and to the broader economy. If lower income workers are paid a living wage, they'll have more money in their pockets, and nearly every economist will tell you that when working families earn more money, they spend it in their local community, boosting sales, creating jobs, and strengthening the economy for everyone. Higher wages also mean there will be fewer Americans who rely on government anti-poverty programs to make ends meet. And at a time when our nation's deficit and debt have reached troubling levels, there's no better way to bring our budget into balance than to give hardworking Americans a raise. I believe passage of this bill would be good for my country and would help my constituents, so I'm proud to support it. Thank you, and I'm honored to introduce Congressman Norcross. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here. Bobby, thank you so much for keeping this in the focus. We see a contrast. What happened when Congress changed the House of Representatives? Trillionaires taken care of. We're going to remember where we came from, and that's the workers who are behind us. In America, you work hard. You play by the rules. You're supposed to be able to make it. Well, that might be happening for some, but not for the ones that we're talking about here today. 11 years. These children over here weren't even born. Were not even born when we last voted on that. That's how bad things are out there. I remember where I came from. I was a single dad earning minimum wage. It was $2.90 when I was earning it. If inflation and productivity had followed, that would now be $18 an hour. That's how far behind we are in this. This is about dignity, about being able to take care of yourself and your family. This isn't about a handout. This is about fairness. And I can't thank those who have worked on this, keeping it in the forefront of people's minds, and certainly each and every day. But the one surprise, and I just want to echo what Mark said. Most people, it's not a surprise that you can't live on minimum wage. What is a surprise, you don't even come close. Literally thousands of dollars. That's not the way we share that promise of America. If you work hard, you play by the rules, you're supposed to be able to do it. So I remember where I came from. Certainly they do. Apparently, well, I guess Donald remembers where he came from. Dad sent me a check. That's another story. You work hard, you play by the rules, you should get paid. And somebody who understands that, and quite frankly, put the committee's right name back in, Education and Labor, our chairman, Bobby Scott. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I want to thank my congressional colleagues for all they've said, but particularly I want to recognize the workers who are here today who have expressed their stories, and our restaurant owner for expressing his story. The next time we get together here, I hope it's because we're celebrating the passage of the bill and 40 million Americans getting a raise. Thank you very much.